So just like that, the 2024 NFL draft has been concluded. How did the Jaguars do? Let's talk about it. So I'll tell you what, as much fun as it is talking about the draft and putting out mock drafts and debating which position you guys may want or which player you guys may want, it's always a relief when the NFL draft is over because look, the cornerstones or the big roster pieces that the Jaguars will need in 2024 are here. Okay, the Jaguars went through free agency. They made all of their draft picks. So, what we have now, we might make an adjustment here or there with maybe signing a depth piece, but the starters are all pretty much in place. Okay, so it's exciting kind of knowing who you're going to roll with in 2024. And in this video, we're going to go over all the draft picks that the Jaguars made and discuss my different thoughts about it. Now, with my overall draft strategy for the Jaguars, we'll go ahead and take a macro view of this, okay, before going into a micro view on different players. Like, overall, when it comes to me, I thought that the Jaguars needed to do a few things. I thought they needed to get a specific type of receiver. They needed to get really a receiver with elite upside because I think the Jaguars have a bunch of pretty good receivers, but I just don't think that they have that game-changing receiver yet. And that's one reason why I was wanting the Jaguars to draft a wide receiver early on before, getting some of the more solid players later on. So I wanted a wide receiver with elite upside, and I wanted a good cornerback, like a solid to good cornerback, a guy that can be a starter in the NFL, and you're not complaining about that guy being a starter. And the Jaguars did that in a third round of this draft. I also thought that the Jaguars needed to get some big men, okay? The Jaguars needed to address big men on both the offensive line and defensive line, and they definitely did so on the defensive line, okay? They drafted a bunch of defensive linemen. I just feel like the Jaguars weren't physical enough last year, and the overall roster got really exposed later on in the season when we were just getting pushed all around, and, the depth just wasn't good overall. And I also wanted the Jaguars to get a kicker. So, really when it comes to positions that I wanted the Jaguars to draft, I mean, it's got to be an A+ for me. I mean, they pretty much did everything I wanted them to do in that space. So, with all that said, I thought that was good. I thought all the positions that Balky drafted made sense, and he wasn't, drafting any running backs on day 2 or, any off-ball linebackers on day 2. The draft positions that Balky picked made sense, okay? So, now we're going to go through each pick, okay? So, with the first pick, the number 17 pick, which turned into the number 23 pick after a trade back, the Jaguars drafted Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver out of LSU. Now, we all know that the Jaguars lost Calvin Ridley at the last second, which wasn't really expected, but once that happened, it was too late into free agency for the Jaguars to really pivot anywhere else, so they knew that in this draft, they were going to have to find a dude to replace that, okay? And the Jaguars needed a specific type of wide receiver. We didn't need any like Roman Wilsons or any like Ricky Pearsalls, like any guys that projected to be better at slot. They needed a guy that was going to be like a true outside threat, a guy that, if we're going to throw to him on a back shoulder or give him a 50-50 ball, he can catch it. A guy that can take the top off of a defense, a guy that can, take a slant route and, make something special happen out of it, So I think that the Jaguars got that with Brian Thomas Jr. If you guys have been following my channel throughout this draft, you guys know that I was pretty ecstatic about this pick. He was the guy that fit the profile of the type of receiver the type of receiver and player that this offense needed desperately, and the Jaguars were able to get that. So I was extremely, extremely pleased with that. And not only did they get that, but they were able to move back and pick up a 2025 third-round pick and a 2025 fourth-round pick, as well as a 2024 fifth-round pick to get the player that they probably would have drafted at number 17 overall anyway. So I thought it was excellent movement, and that draft capital next year will help out the Jaguars a lot, you know what I mean, whether they want to stay there or, whether they want to get aggressive. Like in this year's draft, a bunch of us were kind of talking about maybe the Jaguars should trade up and get one of these top receivers, but quite frankly, the Jaguars probably didn't have the kind of draft capital needed in that draft to do that, and it was going to be very expensive. But if it were the same situation this year where, the Jaguars say had the second round pick, had 2 third-round picks, had 2 fourth-round picks. I mean, that's the situation we're going to see the Jaguars next year. It's a lot more, potentially intriguing to be able to move up and do something like that. So I thought that was really good and a really good way to come out of day one with accumulating more draft picks and still picking the guy that you wanted. So Brian Thomas Jr. was a pick at number 17 overall. And by the way, guys, this video is sponsored by BetUS. And look, if you guys look at Trevor Lawrence's MVP odds, will it go up now that they have a Brian Thomas Jr.? I know that, he's much more willing to win MVP after getting a guy like that. And if you want to drop a bet on Trevor Lawrence, I believe he's number 13th on BetUS when it comes to MVP odds at plus 2,500, I should say. So, if you guys want to place a bet over there, we're giving away $125 in free play. So if you DM me with your BetUS account number, we're going to load your account with $25. But also, if you want to start up an account, BetUS is offering a 125% deposit match on your first 3 deposits up to $2,500, which means that if you put in $500, you'll see $1,250 appear in your account. So BetUS has 24/7 customer support as well as quick 24-hour payouts. So that link will be in the top of my description box. And with all that said, let's get a quick word from this video sponsor, BetUS.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
So in round 2, at number 48 overall, the Jaguars stick with the LSU guys and go defensive tackle Mason Smith out of LSU. And I'll say it again, traits. The Jaguars love their traits on these guys, and that's exactly what this guy has. The first thing the media asked Trent Baalke when they drafted him was, what do you like about him? And Trent Baalke immediately said he likes his size, he likes his length, he likes his power, athleticism. I mean, it's clear that Trent Baalke has their type of defensive lineman to draft, and, that is this guy. And look, he is a big ceiling guy. When Trent Baalke does his analysis, a lot of times he kind of reverse engineers what he wants out of a defensive lineman. So he looks at, some players he drafted like DeForest Buckner or Eric Armstead that wound up working out well. He looks at those guys' traits, and they even looked at Chris Jones. Like, what makes Chris Jones a great defensive tackle? What does he have? And they try to find guys in a draft that kind of fit a similar profile that they have. Now, in 2022, he had an ACL tear, which sidelined him. And then in 2023, he wasn't playing at 100%, but they noticed that he was getting better each week. So now in 2024, when they were doing the offseason medicals on him, it looks like he cleared. It looks like he was pretty good. And with ACL tears, it sucks when you hear it happen, but it's not a very bad long-term injury. They just kind of get lost that season, but they come back usually at 100%. So that's not too bad. And defensive line group, it was kind of slim this draft, so you kind of had to get one early if you wanted to get an impactful one at all. And the big consensus is, was he overdrafted? A lot of people kind of saw him as more of a end of 3rd round or beginning of a 4th round type of prospect, but the Jaguars drafted him in the 2nd round. Now, I'm not going to slam Baalke. We'll see how he does in a couple of years with this pick. Every year you see where guys were drafted, and, if we were to redraft this a year from now, everything's going to be switched up. If you're going to draft things 2 years from now, everything is switched up. The only thing that really isn't switched up that much is really players selected in the top 15 to 20 of the draft, okay? Everything else is pretty much a wild bag. So we will just have to see how this one plays out, but you get a guy at a position of need for the Jacksonville Jaguars, as they needed more big guys. Now, number 96 pick in the 3rd round of the draft with the compensatory pick from Jawan Taylor, the Jaguars drafted cornerback Jarrian Jones from FSU. So there you cornerback people go. I know the cornerback people were very frustrated after the first 2 rounds, but they end Friday night with a cornerback. And, like I said, with the wide receiver versus cornerback debate, I remember during my draft live stream, we did a poll. What do you guys want, wide receiver or cornerback? And it was, kid you not, pretty much split 50-50. So the Jaguars, like I said, they needed an elite wide receiver, but I think they needed a good cornerback, and Jarrian Jones, I think, is that. Now, he was another guy that people said they overdrafted. People were saying he's more of like a fifth-round prospect, but the Jaguars needed to fill a specific role at cornerback. They needed to find man coverage cornerbacks to fit the new defensive scheme that the Jaguars have going on there. And he's a guy that played, outside most of his FSU career, but when he slid inside his final year at FSU, that's where he prospered. So the Jaguars see him as a future nickel cornerback for the Jaguars. And, nickel cornerback is a very important spot in the NFL, and it's becoming increasingly important with, a lot of the best threats in the NFL these days are coming out of the slot, and it's also the closest cornerback to the quarterback, so you got to be good in run support. So the Jaguars picked Jarrian Jones, and, if you haven't watched his first interview with the Jaguars, and he was being interviewed by, by the media, on a media call, he was pumped because he grew up a Jags fan, loved MJD, also loved, Jalen Ramsey coming from FSU, also at cornerback. So, it's cool to see a guy that's excited to be able to stay in the Sunshine State and go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, in the fourth round, I picked 114 overall. The Jaguars draft Javon Foster, offensive tackle from Missouri. Now, he was the only offensive lineman drafted in this draft for the Jaguars. He started every game at Missouri at left tackle the last 3 seasons. So, that's pretty cool to see how he doesn't have like an injury history. And he has the size and strength to be a great player in this NFL and a great tackle in the NFL. He just needs to kind of work on his fundamentals and work on himself in space. And the Jaguars have a peculiar situation at tackle position, because we know Anton Harrison is the future at whether it be at left tackle or right tackle. He is a building block for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but they have Cam Robinson and Walker Little both going into the last years of their deals at left tackle. Do they keep one of those guys in 2025? Do they keep both those guys? Do they keep neither of the guys? So what's the situation at left tackle? Is Anton Harrison a guy that might slide into left tackle next year? Because I know when you look at Javon Foster, he probably, even though he played left tackle at Missouri, I feel like he probably fits a little bit better in that right tackle role, since he is more of a mauler in the run game, but maybe isn't as good in space. Maybe he kind of projects better as a right tackle. So what did the Jaguars do with him? Is he going to start off training camp kind of playing, kind of molding himself into more of a swing tackle spot, or does he stay at the left tackle position and try to master that spot to take over in 2025? Do the Jaguars see him as a future starter, or do they see him as more of a future depth piece for the Jaguars that can move around? I don't know, but with all that said, that's going to be one of the more fascinating storylines as you get more toward training camp. What do the Jaguars do at left tackle, and what do the Jaguars do with Javon Foster? I know last year we were all like, the big question mark was, what do they do between Cam Robinson and Walker Little? One of them is probably going to play guard, and that wound up being Walker Little, who played a lot of left guard last year. So, that's one thing to really monitor going forward. So, in the fourth round, 2 picks later, they drafted Jordan Jefferson, not Justin Jefferson, but Jordan Jefferson from LSU at defensive tackle, the third LSU player drafted by the Jaguars in this draft. So, kind of crazy how that works. Now, probably a contingency plan for Devon Hamilton. He's got the, good strength, got good length to play the position, very, very powerful. He's a hard-to-move player. He's going to be a player that goes in there on obvious run situations. He's also a traits guy, like I said, with, strength, length, and explosiveness. And now the Jaguars have a lot of depth on the interior of the defensive line. You look at the end of the roster, at that spot, you have Tyler Lacey. You just drafted Mason Smith. You still have Devon Hamilton, so you add Jordan Jefferson to that room. Another thing where Jaguars, where the media out there were saying maybe it was another overdraft, but overall you get another big guy in here. We'll just have to see how this one plays out. Now, in the fifth round, at number 153 overall, the Jaguars drafted Deontre Prince, cornerback out of Ole Miss. Now, this was one that we probably could have easily mocked go to the Jaguars, because the Jaguar, he's projected as a day 3 pick, right? And the Jaguars both visited him at his pro day and also had a top 30 visit with him. So it was clear from the beginning that the Jaguars were pretty high on this guy if he was one of 30 people that they wanted to bring into the building for an interview and to kind of show around the crib. Now, while Jarrian Jones projects as an inside corner, Prince projects as more as an outside corner, okay? He was a 3-year starter at Ole Miss, and he's a solid man coverage player, and he also turned a lot of heads when he ran a 4.38 40 at the NFL Combine. So, with that said, where does Deontre Prince fit in here? Is he going to really compete with Ronald Darby to start on the outside, or is he more seen as a depth piece for the Jaguars going forward that can become a core special teams player? We'll just have to see. So next up, in the 5th round, the Jaguars had this pick. Via the trade back with the Vikings, they drafted Kellen Robinson at number 167, running back from University of Texas. Now, I don't see this guy playing offense very much. I see this guy mostly and pretty much fully a special teams role. We all know that the kickoff rule changed dramatically in the NFL, and now there's probably going to be 2 core kick returners in the NFL. So he'll be sharing that position with Devin Duvernay, and we'll just have to see how this one plays out. And look, we're in round 5, and really rounds 5 through 7, I think you kind of crumble up your paper, throw it away when it comes to really consensus board guys, and you go after just your guys, okay? Go after, guys that you think can be good special teamers, or, guys with traits that you really, really like that could turn into a really good player. This is the kind of the rounds to get creative. So, I'm not going to slam this one too much, although I will say the next pick in the 6th round, number 212, you drafted Cam Little, kicker out of Arkansas. Now, if I were the Jaguars, I probably would have drafted kicker in the 5th round, and then because I very much believe that Kellen Robinson would have lasted until the 6th round, because at least NFL draft guys were not super high on him as well. He was kind of off of the top 300 board, but with Cam Little, I love being able to draft a kicker. He's a kicker out of Arkansas, and there were 3 kickers taken, however, and 2 kickers taken before the Jaguars selected Cam Little. At pick number 203, Will Reichert was selected. 6 picks later, Joshua Carty was drafted. Then 3 picks later, Cam Little was drafted. And, for me, Reichert was the best kicker in this draft, so I would have done anything possible to be able to get the top kicker, and I probably would have used that pick number 167 to make sure that we get our kicker. But with that said, can't complain too much because you still get a good kicker who will probably be the Jaguars starting kicker this year, especially after all the crazy kicker moves the Jaguars have been making the last couple of years. I think that he'll be the Jaguars' day 1 kicker for the Jaguars, and hopefully we have some stability at that position for the next 8 to 10 years. We'll just have to see there. Now, finally, the Jaguars round out this draft in the 7th round at pick number 236 overall, drafting Miles Cole, edge rusher out of Texas Tech. Now, this is another guy where he has the elite traits. He's got really, really good length. I think he has the longest arms of anybody in this draft class. He has really good power, really good athleticism. But his big thing is that he's played in college for 6 years, but he's still viewed as a project, okay? So in the 7th round, draft your project guys, and edge rusher is definitely a need. So we'll kind of see how he develops behind a room that has guys like Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. So plenty of guys to learn from there. So overall, I think that really with this draft, it's a very, very high ceiling draft. Look, if all of these guys hit their potential, we're going to have an elite draft class here. However, it is very volatile. The Jaguars, according to the consensus, they overdrafted a lot of players, and they drafted a lot of guys that project as good players based on what their traits are, not necessarily guys that they drafted strictly off of how good their tape was. You know what I mean? So we'll know this one a lot better in 2 years. I know there's going to be all kinds of people in the comment section saying, terrible draft, what are we doing? I know for me, I'm more here to kind of tell you guys what happened, why it happened, what these guys are going to look like going forward. It's impossible to, you revisit draft grades all the time. They do it on CBS Sports, for example. Prisco will go back like 3 or 4 years and regrade the previous draft grades that he has. And it's always interesting to look at that because, man, everybody's totally wrong about these draft grades. It's just so volatile. And if you do redrafts, we might have multiple day 3 guys actually get redrafted in the first round of redraft. So it's always interesting to see. So I think overall, though, the Jaguars address some of their top needs. I still think maybe you got to get better at edge rusher. So maybe this offseason explore what you can do to get better over there, and potentially more depth at the offensive line, because, as bad as the offensive line was last year for the Jaguars, all they really did was to improve that in this offseason was sign Mitch Morse to a 2-year deal, and they drafted Javon Foster in the 4th round. Okay, so maybe find ways to get more depth there, because look, if one of your guards gets injured, at this point you have Tyler Shatley going in. If your center gets injured, you have Luke Fortner probably going in there, which saying Luke Fortner in a draft video or any video from this point forward feels a little bit dirty, okay? Because I don't want to be mentioning this guy's name anymore. I don't want to see this guy on the field for the Jacksonville Jaguars that much more anymore. So we'll just have to see. But with all that said, very exciting and very happy this draft is over. So now we can really focus on what the Jaguars look like, this upcoming season. And we have our core in place for now. And let's hope that we have a good 2024 season, because I do really like this offseason for the Jaguars. I was definitely skeptical about it because I'm not a big Trent Baalke guy, but I think he nailed free agency. And, I think at the very least he got positions that the Jaguars needed in this draft. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. So with all that said, if you guys enjoyed my coverage of this draft, please drop a like for me. It really helps out the channel, and leave a comment down below. That also helps me out. And also subscribe if you haven't already. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers. And let me tell you guys what, I have a lot of fun stuff prepared for this upcoming season. So hopefully you will all stick with me. And with all that said, thank you guys for watching, and go Jags.